Almost everyone who plays the game laments the fact that certain archetypes have been great in the past, or could have been great, have been generally ignored as the game marches on into the future. What could have been if these various archetypes had received more support? While I tend not to have any real favorites for decks that should receive support, in passing when I was making and testing various deck builds, I thought that the following archetypes would be worthy of new support in some attempt to give them another shot at the so-called big time. This is not a list of sorts. I have no preference to which of these decks receives supports versus another. Also, I will highlight probably 2 cards for each archetype that I think would help advance the deck in a positive way. Here I try to make the presented examples more focused on the general need for the given archetype rather than the exact effect. Finally, before I begin, note that if you want to multitask while listening to the audio for this video, then feel free to do that, for there is nothing visually critical in the video. The audio really holds all the relevant discussion information. So, with that, let's begin. I was recently updating my scrap deck, and in the process, I realized that scrap decks still have a lot of potential, but seem to have one glaring problem preventing them from achieving that potential. It's quite simply, it's a lack of good monsters. Scraps already have some very nice spell and trap support with Factory, Storm, and Yard, but the monster selection significantly handicaps the efficient use of this quality support. In my opinion, there are only 3 good monsters in Chimera, Beast, and Golem, with Goblin being okay, nice little stall card, but doesn't really do that much. Orthos, Shark, and Kong are rather bad cards unless Factory is on the field, and the rest of the monsters are just so bad they're not even worth mentioning. So for Scraps really to kind of shine, they need better monsters. So what type of monsters would help Scrap decks? Here are my 2 thoughts. First, I'm pretty bad with names, so the names are just kind of almost placeholders in a sense. We have something like Scrap Morph, an Earth, Beast, level 4, 1400 attack, 800 defense point monster, with the effect of, when this card is special summoned by the effect of a scrap card, return 1 scrap monster in your graveyard to your hand. When this card is destroyed by a scrap card effect, draw 1 card, then either send 1 card in your hand to the graveyard, or 1 scrap monster in your extra deck to the graveyard. One of the smaller problems with Scrap is the fact that a vast majority of the time, Chimera is the one you want to add to your hand when you get the monster destroyed via Scrap effect, return 1 scrap monster in the graveyard to your hand. The problem with always getting Chimera, because you want to get Chimera because you want to ensure maximum deck speed and flow. And Chimera is really the card that governs that. It helps, it's the card that speeds the summons of another Scrap Synchro or an XZ most often. The problem is this strategy reduces the ability to manipulate other aspects of deck operation, like the number of Scrap Synchro monsters in your extra deck. You, in a sense, almost have to run 3 Scrap Dragons, because it's harder and harder to return a Scrap Dragon in your graveyard back to your extra deck. This monster helps increase scrap consistency by reversing the effect, so when you special summon this card via Golem, Factory, or Chimera, you get that effect, which adds extra utility to the deck. The draw effect helps increase the speed of the scrap deck, and also gives you the option that you might have something in your hand that you want to dump into the graveyard, or if you want to really keep the card you drew and keep everything else in your hand, it gives you the versatility of sending a scrap monster in your extra deck to your graveyard. Something that kind of hurts, but it's not that you can recover from with the various other scrap effects. The second card would be something like Scrap Beacon. Another Earth. This one would be a machine, level 4, 1000 attack, 1000 defense, and it's a tuner. You can banish 1 scrap spell or trap card in your graveyard to special summon this card from your hand. This card cannot be destroyed as a result of battle with a pendulum summoned monster or targeted by a pendulum summoned monster effect. When this card is destroyed by a scrap card effect, return up to 2 face-up monsters in your opponent's extra deck to the main deck. During either player's turn, if this monster is in your graveyard, you can return it to your deck to special summon one scrap token, Earth Machine, level 1, 100 attack, 100 defense, in face-up defense position. It's rather obvious why this card exists for me. The principal effect is to neutralize the swarming inconsistency of pendulum decks, because the destruction effect of Scrap Dragon and the return to hand effect of Twin are really heavily handicapped against pendulum decks. They serve almost no benefit. Instead of breaking even or quasi-plussing, you're actually kind of almost negative. You're almost getting a negative when you activate those effects against pendulum decks. Scrap Beacon gives scrap decks an ability to counter that advantage. Also, another somewhat general problem for scrap decks, why so many of them run Reborn Tengu, is having something available to destroy via one of the Synchro Monster effects. This card is able to produce that destruction element at relative little cost through the natural flow of the game. That's not an overwhelming plus, but it's a nice advantage. Moving on, in my alien deck build, I said that the only thing that alien decks need to become consistently competitive was speed. For they really have everything else. They have good ways of getting A counters on the field, they have an impressive and useful boss monster in Cosmic Fortress, and they have a variety of ways of removing monsters from the field. Again, they just need that additional speed. So the best way I think to address this speed issue, while not going crazy and making some crazy broken card, as well as staying in the context of the archetype, is just a simple card like Alien Quartermaster. Light Reptile, level 4, 1700 attack, 1400 defense. First it'll have the standard A counter attack reduction effect. And then the following effect: when this card destroys a monster with at least one A counter as a result of battle, you can select one of the following effects. First, draw one card, or discard one alien monster from your hand, draw two cards. Finally, I'd give it a graveyard effect. During your opponent's end phase, you can banish one alien monster and one alien spell or trap card from the graveyard, and skip your next draw phase to add this card from your graveyard to your hand. This card is very simple, but still gets the job done. It has no innate protection, so it is difficult for this card to really rack up the advantage unless you really commit to protecting it. But even if it only gets one kill, it provides help. The second effect is nice because you can feed the graveyard to set up Ammonite in addition to move faster through the deck. Also, you can special summon this card with Ammonite for a quick means to produce multiple pluses. Finally, with the graveyard effect, you do have to sacrifice. You have to get rid of an alien monster and spell a trap, plus your draw phase, to put this back into your hand. But you're going to do that when you know you can get some you think you can get some level of advantage of it. While a card like Quartermaster is really all aliens need, in my opinion, to be consistently competitive, it would be nice for them to get a bonus card that has a variety of effects based on the number of A counters removed from the field. For example, something like, Seeds of War. Quick play spell. Select one of the following effects. Remove 3 A counters from the field to negate all opponent monster effects until the next end phase. Remove 4 A counters from the field to add one alien spell or trap card from your deck or your graveyard to your hand. Remove 5 A counters from the field to special summon 2 alien monsters from your graveyard with different levels. Counters from the field to skip your opponent's next draw phase. During either player's turn, when this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it to add 1 A counter to any monster currently on the field. So you can activate this during your turn or your opponent's turn. Your opponent's turn if you want to stop them from making a big monster effect laden play, or your turn if they have something that you need to get over that you can't due to a monster effect. Where you have additional versatility to grab an alien spell or trap card from the deck or graveyard. You can special summon aliens to set up maybe a Cosmic Fortress play, or you can even, if you're really able to get those A counters on the field, you can skip your opponent's next draw phase. Now, this would be where this card might have to get a little play testing, because initially you might think, skipping the draw phase, that's pretty up there in usefulness. but 6 counters are kind of hard. I mean, the only real way to get mass counter in alien decks is virus, but your opponent has to be kind of, I guess, risky or almost even stupid and just do a lot of mass summoning when virus's effect is available. Or 2, you run Cosmic Fortress, but both you and your opponent have to just level the field with a bunch of face-up cards that Fortress can start bouncing back. So whether or not that effect is too powerful, I don't know. Initially I want to say no, because you have to design a specialized type of alien build to really get it consistently, and I don't think that build is very effective. Moving on to the next archetype, I think the biggest problem Cloudians seem to have is that the best way to add fog counters is through their own effects, because Ghost Fog and Squall are options, but not very dependable ones. However, Cloudian effects only trigger when normal summoned, so while cards like Chain Summoning and Double Summon exist, these cards can be somewhat inconsistent. I think Cloudians need a card similar to O-Lion, with a normal summons effect and then a graveyard effect that facilitates a second normal summons. For example, something like Cloudian Jetstream. It's a water fairy, level 4, 1200 attack, 0 defense. The standard Cloudian archetype text, about if it's in defense position, destroy it, normal summon, get the fog counters, etc., etc. With the core effect of you can remove any number of fog counters from this card to add an equal number of fog counters between any number of monsters on the field. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it to select one of the following effects. Add one level 4 lower Cloudian monster in your deck to your hand, or immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon one Cloudian monster from your hand. I think this card really would help Cloudians because, as mentioned before, not only do you get that ability to produce that extra normal summons, which helps you add up the fog counters, you can search for a Cloudian monster, which helps the consistency and versatility of your deck, and Jetstream has its own effect where there are certain Cloudian monsters that only get their effects when removing fog counters from that particular card. So Jetstream can help facilitate those effects by, I summon myself, there are 2 other Cloudian monsters, I get 3, you have 1, you have 1. So if I can add 1 to you and 1 to you, both of you can trigger your effects. I think a card like Jetstream really helps Cloudians add that versatility too, because they have some good effects, it's just hard for them to get those effects to trigger. Furthermore, I think it would help Cloudians if they had a more reliable means to add fog counters outside of the normal summons, or just hoping Squall stays on the field for an unrealistic long period of time. Altered Stormfront. Normal spell. Return up to 4 Cloudian monsters in your graveyard to your deck to add 1 fog counter to any card on the field per monster returned to the deck. If all of the fog counters added by this card effect are used during the current turn for at least 2 Cloudian card effects, then special summon 1 level 4 or lower Cloudian monster from your deck. Some may look at this card maybe as a little too weak to be useful because you're only adding 1 fog counter, but anyone who's played Cloudians should know that if this were 2 fog counters, i.e. you had a chance to add 8 fog counters with a single card, that is a lot more consistent than something like Ghost Fog and trying to tailor it to a Conju monster or a Lava Golem or something, you'd know that would be a big deal and really potentially broken. And just look at any of the Cloudian monsters and think, holy crud, look what these things could do if they had 8 fog counters. They could wipe all the monsters on the field, they could wipe out all the back row on the field, they could discard 2, 3 cards from your opponent's hand. 8 counters would be too much. This card also has that nice side benefit that if you spread out the fog counters between Cloudian monsters, you get a free summons. But it's a special summon, so you don't get to take advantage of that Cloudian effect. Add counters. The next deck is Amazonas. Amazonas have two major problems as I can see it. First, and more importantly, is that their specialty was supposed to be swarming due to various attack-based increases due to the number of monsters on the field, except they're not good at it. There are at least 10 decks in the game, not including any pendulum deck, that are better at swarming. Thus, Amazonas have completely lost their niche and the very point of their existence, in a sense. Second, they have a very difficult time retaking the field once they've lost control because while their level 4 monsters aren't bad, they're just not very powerful individually, and as mentioned above, they're not very good swarmers, even though that's kind of what they're supposed to be. Thus, the lack of a quality boss monster of sorts really hurts the deck. For those that think Amazonas Queen is a quality boss monster, all I can say is that you and I have vastly different viewpoints on what constitutes a quality boss monster. Basically, the only real strategy for producing an even playable Amazonas deck is load up on Solidarity, Command Knight, Fiendish Chain, Battleground Howlings, and just hope to overpower the opponent with just simple raw attack power. How can this be changed? There is little point in making them better at swarming directly because that really won't change their attractiveness. There's almost always going to be better decks at swarming. What needs to be done is give them a result or a destination for their swarming that no other deck has. The best way to accomplish that is give Amazonas their own archetype-specific XZ monster with effects relative to swarming that can serve as a boss monster of sorts. For example, a card that would fit this ideal is something like Amazonas Sacred Goddess, Earth Warrior, rank 4, 2400 attack, 2500 defense. You can make it with 2 or more level 4 monsters. Its effect would be, this card receives the following effects based on its Amazonas XZ material. Paladin. At the start of your main phase 1, you can special summon 2 Amazonas monsters from your graveyard with the same level and immediately make an XZ monster with those 2 monsters. Then it becomes the end phase of this turn. Swordswoman. Double any battle damage this card deals to the opponent when it destroys a monster as a result of battle. Trainee. This card cannot be targeted by opponent's card effects. Sage. During your standby phase, send 1 Amazonas spell or trap card from your deck to your graveyard to destroy 1 spell or trap card on your opponent's field. Your opponent cannot activate the targeted card in response to this effect. Tiger. Once per turn, when your opponent special summons a monster, you can send 1 Amazonas monster in your deck to the graveyard to negate the effect of the summoned monster and reduce its attack equal to 100 times its level or rank. And its base detach effect would be something like, once per turn, if you detach 1 XZ monster, then once until your opponent's next end phase, during either player's turn, you can banish 1 Amazonas spell or trap from the graveyard to activate this banished card. Now the ruling on this would of course be that the circumstances involving this card's activation would still have to be valid. It's not like Diamond Dude. Now some could argue that that type of card would pigeonhole deck design because I'm specifically saying you have to have this particular monster as the XZ material. So I don't have the Unfriendly Amazon, I don't have Amazonas Archer, Chainmaster, or Fighter. But in reality, does anyone actually run any of those cards outside of throwing in maybe a Fighter because, I want to run an Amazonas deck, but I guess I don't have anything else? Or using Archer in some cheap OTK loop design that has really nothing to do with Amazonas? Not really. Those cards really just aren't used, period. So their restrictions from this Amazonas boss monster type isn't really debilitating. Now, some could argue, what if they get other level 4 monsters? They don't need any level 4 monsters. So, no more level 4 monsters. What they could need, they have 1 level 2, 1 level 3, 1 level 6, no 5s, no 7 pluses or 1s. They could get more of those, but they don't need any more level 4s. Overall, this card does help swarming. It helps, do some damage with Swordswoman's effect. Can stay on the field due to Trainee's effect. It can destroy some stuff using Sage's effect, and it can stop your opponent from making big plays using Tiger's effect. So everything pretty useful off this card. And the thing with this is some people might view it as, oh my gosh, this is so overpowered. If you think that, you're largely thinking about this card in context of it has all 5 pieces. And in some contexts, if you're able to swing it where you can get all 5 of these cards on the field and make this XZ, good for you. You deserve a powerful monster, because outside of Soul Charge, it's incredibly hard to do. And even if you use Soul Charge, you're going to have to use 3,000 to 5,000 life points to do it. So you should get a powerful monster. It's a much more elongated way of getting a powerful monster than simply normal summoning a level 4 instant fusion, Norden's effect, Ptolemaios, Nova, Infinity. Or if you're playing Raid Raptors, here's a spell card, here's my half my life points, Infinity. As mentioned, while Amazonas don't need any more level 4 monsters, that should not close the door on whether or not they get any more good non-level 4 monsters. Thus, maybe we could have a support card that helps the creation of an Amazonas deck that just doesn't rely on level 4 monsters. For example, the card could be something like Tribute to the Sacred Goddess. It's a quick play spell. Return up to 2 Amazonas monsters from the graveyard to your deck. Then target 1 Amazonas monster on your field and apply the appropriate effects based on the level of monsters returned. Level 1 or 2. Cannot be targeted by card effects until your next end phase. Level 3. When this card inflicts 1,000 or more damage via battle, draw 1 card. Level 4. Until your next end phase, you contribute the monster to special summon a number of level 4 monsters equal to the number of level 4 monsters returned by this effect in face-up defense mode. Level 5. When this card destroys a monster as a result of battle, it can attack once more. Level 6. When this card inflicts battle damage, special summon 1 Amazonas monster from your graveyard at the end of the battle phase. Level 7 plus. When this card inflicts battle damage, look at your opponent's hand and banish 1 card face down. Note that these effects would not be additive, so if I return 2 level 3 monsters, I wouldn't get double the effect, aka I wouldn't be able to draw 2 cards if I inflict 1,000 or more damage. No, they're not additive, only draw 1 card. As mentioned, yes, there are no level 5 or 7 plus Amazonas, but that's not to say that those levels couldn't be filled in the future. They won't be, more than likely, but who knows. So you should, I guess, design a card with the expectations that that could be a possibility. I like the design of this card because it provides versatility to those players who want to run other Amazonas monsters other than the level 4, but it also aids in the summons of Sacred Goddess due to the level 4 effect, because its card name is Tribute to the Sacred Goddess, so there should be some helpful boost to getting it on the field. The next archetype, the major problem with Ancient Gear is that it has this reputation as a big monster deck, but it has limited ability to outperform a number of swarming decks because deck design is pretty much a minefield of bad draws, because all of the non-tribute monsters are rather bad. One of the ways a number of, I guess, card designers like in pieces like this try to fix the deck is they just break out that incredibly lazy and uncreative phrase, ignore summoning conditions. Ancient Gear already has cards like that, and they're still not competitive. So spamming more cards like that, I just don't think that's the answer. And it's almost like this dirty brute force way of trying to make the deck, competitive, and it's just, there's no style to it in a sense. It's just ridiculous. I think 2 more creative ideas would be trying to expand the available useful targets associated with Ancient Gearbox, because when you read Ancient Gearbox, it looked like that card was supposed to be kind of a centerpiece card for Ancient Gears. And the other idea would be playing off the archetype's no battle trap strength. Your opponent can't activate battle traps. So 2 cards for that, for example. 1 card might be Ancient Gear Polisher, Earth, Machine, level 2, 500 attack, 0 defense. You can target one Ancient Gear monster you control, equip this card from your hand or your side of the field to that target. Once per turn, when this card is equipped to a monster, you can special summon this card. The targeted monster gains the following effect based on this level as long as this card is equipped. Level 3 or lower. Once per turn, you can special summon one monster with the same name from your deck or graveyard and negate its effect. Level 4, when this card is targeted by a card effect, you can immediately tribute this card to draw 2 cards. Level 5 or 6, when this card destroys a monster as a result of battle, you can return one Ancient Gear monster in your graveyard to your deck to look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. Select one card and banish it. Your opponent then shuffles the deck. Level 7 plus, when this card destroys a monster as a result of battle, you can select one level 2 or lower Ancient Gear monster in your graveyard and one level 2 or lower Ancient Gear monster in your deck and add them to your hand. Obviously, one of the centerpiece ideas of this card is to get players to use those level 2 and lower Ancient Gear monsters, as well as box, especially looking at that level 7 plus effect. Clearly, a few more Ancient Gear monsters need to be made available to work with box to make this card really shine, but the effect is, I think, a good start. The effect overall works differently with a variety of Ancient Gear monsters, providing draw power, deck thinning, and tempo disruption for the opponent. And it also can special summon itself through, if I have an Ancient Gear on the field, I can equip it, then I can special summon itself off that to help reduce tribute load. The second card would be something like Ancient Gear Superiority. Continuous Trap. When an attack from one of your opponent's monsters is negated by a spell or trap card effect, add one counter to this card. When an attack from one of your monsters is negated by a spell or trap card effect, subtract one counter from this card. This card receives the following effects per attached counter. These effects are additive. One counter. If this card would be removed from the field by an opponent's card effect, banish one Ancient Gear monster from your graveyard to negate and destroy that card. 2 counters. Once per turn, tribute one Ancient Gear monster to add one Ancient Gear monster in your deck to your hand. 3 counters. Once per turn, when an Ancient Gear monster is targeted by a card effect, you can remove one counter from this card to negate that effect. 4 counters. During your end phase, you can banish 4 Ancient Gear spell or trap cards from your graveyard with one Ancient Gear monster. Your opponent must send all monsters with attack points equal to or lower than the banished Ancient Gear monster from their side of the field and their hand to the graveyard. Clearly, one of the strengths of the Ancient Gears is restricting the ability of the opponent to activate battle traps. Thus, they should have a card that takes advantage of that strength. The hardest part of this card is getting the first counter, but making it a continuous trap instead of a continuous spell should help, allowing its activation in chain to the activation of a card that negates an attack, which gets you that first counter easily. Again, this card helps deck speed and offers a level of protection for Ancient Gears. Some could argue that this card is not immediately helpful because the opponent could simply stop attacking, so you can't flip over things that add counters to this card, but that behavior in and of itself is helpful because it ensures the maintenance of field presence for tributing higher level Ancient Gears. Now, I was going to stop at 5, but I thought to myself in deck creation, I ran across another deck and I thought, wow, this deck, it needs some help. And the deck is Yubel. The major problem with Yubel decks is the simple fact that Yubel and its advanced forms are kind of pointless, in that there's no real advantage to summoning them. Getting Yubel on the field is easy. You dump it into the graveyard and summon it with a recursion card, most notably Limit Reverse. You summon it from the deck, most notably with Mystic Tomato, or you can even normal summon it from the hand using something like Sinister Yoshiro. However, once Yubel is on the field, one starts to question, why did I even summon this card in the first place? Yubel itself is basically worthless in that it destroys itself with no benefit unless a monster is tributed during your end phase, and it has no benefit beyond simple stall unless the opponent attacks, which no opponent really would do unless they had some sort of plan and to create a unique circumstance where they could get over the card. Is probably the best of the 3 forms, but it's not good because one still has the Yubel I have to be attacked restriction on its damage ability. 2, it can miss timing for summoning Nightmare. 3, its destruction effect activates during the controller's end phase, which is tied for probably the most worthless time it could be activated. 4, well, the reason for that obviously is because, wow, I'm going to wipe out all your monsters at the end of my turn. Well, that doesn't give me any type of window to do actual damage. 4, also associated with the destruction effect, why am I destroying all the monsters on the field except for Terror? Why am I not just destroying my opponent's monsters, or a specific number of monsters? I'm basically hurting myself almost as much as I'm hurting my opponent. Finally, when you bring out Nightmare, at least that sheds the I have to be attacked restriction, but Nightmare has no innate protection, so for all the work you put in to getting Nightmare onto the field, it can just be removed by anything that removes a monster without resorting to battle, be it monster effect, spell or trap card effect. Yeah, you could run Safe Zone to try to protect it, but then that gets into some inefficiencies and whatnot as well. I mean, Yubel really needs support cards that gives a reason for getting Yubel on the field, that gives Yubel some meaning of, wow, I'm just not running this deck just to run it. There's actually a purpose to bringing Yubel out. Yubel actually becomes a meaningful victory condition. So what should this deck get? Well, instead of 2 cards, I decided to make 3 because I felt it worked best. So, names, who knows, Yubel Minion 1, we'll call it. Dark Fiend, level 2, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. This card cannot be destroyed by the effect of a Yubel monster. When this card is normal summoned, you can reveal 1 Yubel monster in your hand to your opponent, to return the revealed card to your deck and draw 1 card. When this card is sent to the graveyard outside of its own effect, attach this card to 1 Yubel monster on your field as an equip spell. If the equip monster would be destroyed, you can destroy this card instead. You can banish this card from your graveyard to select 1 Yubel monster on the field and increase its attack points by 2500 until the next end phase. As you can see, this card does 3 things. It helps you eliminate bad Yubel draws when you draw one of Yubel or one of his 2 level 10 plus forms. It helps you protect Yubel Nightmare. And it helps you say, another problem with Yubel that I didn't mention above is it's got 0 attack. So even if your opponent's just sitting there with a clear field, Yubel can't do anything. So it rectifies that issue. So for 1 turn, one of those higher ups Yubels, or even one of these little baby Yubels, this one or the 2 others you're going to see afterwards, it bumps it up to 2500 attack, so at least you can do some damage if your opponent just decides, I'm just not going to summon a monster this turn because Yubel does nothing. Moving on, Yubel Minion number 2. Dark Fiend, level 2, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. This card cannot be destroyed by the effect of a Yubel monster. When this card is normal summoned, you can pay 500 life points to return 1 banished Yubel monster to your hand. When this card is sent to the graveyard outside of its own effect, attach this card to 1 Yubel monster on your field as an equipped spell card. If the equipped monster is targeted by an opponent's card effect, negate the effect. Destroy the card, and destroy this card. During your opponent's main phase 1, if you have a Yubel monster on your field, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target 1 opponent's monster and immediately change it to face-up attack position. If the targeted monster does not attack a Yubel monster before the next end phase, select one of the following effects. Your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards until your next end phase. Your opponent cannot normal or special summon a monster during their next turn. So what this card is obviously trying to do is, 1, it's recursion. Get your Yubel minions that you're banishing back. 2, it offers targeting protection. And then 3, it deals with another small problem of Yubel mentioned above, that if you have Terror or Yubel normal on the field, and your opponent's not attacking, they can't do anything. This card says, alright, I'm going to give you a choice. I don't like the raw, hey, let's just force the opponent to attack. No, let's give the opponent a choice. You can either attack, get some damage, Or you can choose not to attack and either lose your ability to activate spell or traps next turn during my turn, or you can't normal or special summon during your next turn. Finally, the third card would be Yubel Minion number 3. Ooh, creative names. Dark Fiend, level 2, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. This card cannot be destroyed by the effect of a Yubel monster. When this card is normal summoned, you can normal summon one Yubel monster in addition to your normal summon or set. When this card is sent to the graveyard outside of its own effect, attach this card to one Yubel monster on your field as an equipped spell card. If this equipped monster inflicts battle damage to your opponent, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. If any of the revealed cards are Yubel monsters, you can add 1 to your hand, then shuffle the rest back into your deck. When a Yubel monster destroys an opponent's monster, or monsters, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon the monsters to your side of the field. Banish any monster summoned by this effect during your next end phase. So clearly what Minion 3 is designed to do is, 1, I just drew into Yubel. Well, that's a wasted draw. Well, Minion 3 says, well, if I have something on the field, I can normal summon this, and then I can tribute summon my Yubel. So it reduces the garbageness of actually having to draw Yubel into your hand just a little. It also helps move through your deck a little faster, sort out some of those bad draws with its, Pot of Duality-esque Yubel effect. And finally, again, it helps Nightmare get a little more juice in its effect. Oh, I'm going to blow something up. I can get my damage, and then I can, Goyo Guardian-esque summon that card and attack again with that card I just summoned, then that card gets banished. Or with Terror now Terror's effect actually has some level of value. I blow up your monsters, I summon 1 or 2 of them or however many to my side of the field, and now I've got either protection or I can use these monsters against you during my next turn. And they die and get banished eventually. Note that I imagine this would work in combination with Terror in the context that if, let's say, Terror destroys 2 monsters via its effect, and you activate this effect, the monsters will be special summoned to your field and not banished until the next end phase. That's the goal, so if the wording of the effect doesn't correspond to that idea, then a change would need to be made to fulfill that idea, say something like at the start of your end phase or something. So I just kind of put these 3 cards together just off the top of my head, so I can definitely say I have no idea if they're too powerful or too weak. They definitely don't seem too weak, and I think the Yubel archetype is too restricted right now for them to actually be too powerful, but who knows. Overall, I think these are cards that help these 6 different archetypes that would advance their ability to be competitive. Do I expect any of these archetypes to get any quality support in the future? Probably not, but it certainly would be nice if one of the next sets in the future that we haven't seen from the OCG would actually just say, you know what, we're going to make 60 cards, we're going to focus on 8 archetypes of the past, and here's some new support for them. But, as stated, it probably won't happen. Anyways, this has been pretty long, but for those of you still with it, I have put all the cards in the description box, so if you don't have to go over and over and just listen to them too. They're there, so you can read at your leisure if you wish. If you want to post in the comments about archetypes that you think should get more support because they're on that cusp of competitiveness, and you want to see them driven over so you can actually start playing them for in tournaments and win stuff with them, feel free. With that, thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.